Everybody, and Chag Sameach. It's wonderful to be here on this very special day, on this 72nd anniversary of Israel's establishment. And we're going to be doing something very special to give you a unique spirit of this day. And I have invited two members of my family, and they are my son and daughter-in-law, Joshua and Abby Seed. And you can see them in a picture that was taken at their wedding just a few months ago on August 28th. And they are still happy and still smiling, as they always are, as you can see from this picture of their wedding. But now they're in a different place. They're back in Jerusalem. And what I would like to do today is to have an opportunity to dialogue with Abby and Joshua. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask of them, please feel free to do so. You can use the chat button. I'm also working with our media specialist, with Sarah, who is helping to produce this event for everybody. So again, live from Jerusalem and Toronto, I'd like to welcome and introduce Joshua and Abby Seed. So here's a picture from the wedding, and here they are in person in their apartment in Jerusalem. So Chag Sameach to both of you.
Thank you. Chag Sameach to you as well.
Yes, thank you for inviting us to be a part of today's event.
It's difficult, I know, for you and for us, that we can't go to Pearson and get on a Air Canada or El Al jet and fly directly to you. But hopefully we'll be able to do that soon. But this is one of the next best things, which is having a chance to talk with you and to kind of reflect on life living in Israel and in Jerusalem. Maybe if you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing there, what life is like for you now. So we could begin with that.
Yeah.
So after our wedding, we came back to Israel almost immediately, 2 weeks later. And I started a job shortly thereafter at a high-tech company that creates photo editing apps. Israel has a booming high-tech scene, so being part of that is really, really great.
And I'm working in a transportation engineering firm in Tel Aviv. But just like Toronto and Canada, most of the world has experienced our work life has seen a little bit of a shift as a result of the current situation. So instead of commuting to our respective offices like we used to in the time, since we made Aliyah and came back after our wedding, we're now working entirely from home. So for the past 2 months, we've been commuting from our bedroom to other rooms in the apartment every single day. So we get to spend a lot of time together, but we're spending it inside most days.
Well, I'm sure it's not how you expected to spend your first year of marriage after the wedding. So it's quite unusual way to really get to know each other very, very well.
Yeah.
So what has life been like for both of you in the country, living under quarantine, and especially living in Jerusalem, in the capital of Israel? What's that been like?
So I'd say that Israel very quickly took very strict precautions. They shut things down almost immediately. Travel was limited, both by buses and like flights in and out of the country. Like works shut down, offices, they didn't allow big gatherings very early on. So they did a lot to prevent the spread. But obviously it just takes a really long time to see the effects.
Right, because of the number of proportionally Israel's a small country, but Israelis tend to travel a lot abroad. So that was a big worry early on, is that because it's a small country and it would have it would easily spread within people living fairly close to one another. They took a lot of precautions that other countries didn't, which was the requirement that if you were coming from abroad, you immediately have to self-quarantine for 2 weeks, which meant that you saw, even before it spread to the degree that it did in Europe, North America, you already saw airlines canceling their flights to Israel, which meant that they limited the spread from abroad, and they were just working then to contain its spread within Israel. So I think my understanding, the big difference then that you saw from North America was that we had restrictions just on the distance that we could go from our home outside. So, just like in America and in Canada, where they closed non-essential businesses, we had the additional step, which was that unless you're going from work or to pharmacy or something like that, you were not expected to leave your home except for small, short exercise periods, but otherwise you're expected to stay at home pretty much.
So much so that they canceled buses, like they would limit the bus schedule to be from at 9 o'clock at night, there was no more transportation like within the city. And then on Thursdays, by Thursday night, there was no more city transportation until Sunday morning. Like they didn't want anybody moving around over the weekends when people normally get together.
So how far can you go from your house?
So originally, during its most restrictive manner, it was 100 meters. Again, if it's not for a purpose that's considered essential, like helping an elderly family member, food, pharmacy, etc. Now it's been extended to 500 meters, and slowly they're starting the process of trying to, in stages, restart the economy and education up to younger grades in order to slowly ease back in and see if the spread is able to be contained as they ease the economy back in.
You were also telling me that if I were to get a flight to Israel, I should only be so lucky, what would happen once I would arrive in Israel?
So it's actually a dual faceted question, because still right now there are restrictions on non-citizens or non-residents being allowed into the country. So for example, Josh and I are citizens. So if we were in Canada and flew back to Israel, we would be allowed back in the country. Somebody without citizenship at the current state would not be allowed into Israel. That being said, if citizens were outside the country and came back in, there is you could take over about that.
Yeah, the Ministry of Defense, in conjunction with the military, has taken control of bringing all passengers that fly into the country to hotels for a mandatory period of 2 weeks of quarantine under the auspices of the IDF. So during the first stage, for instance, I was abroad a month and a half ago, I was allowed to go home on my own and go into self-imposed quarantine in my apartment. Now they've taken the further step of bringing every single person that comes from abroad into a hotel and making sure that they quarantine by putting them there.
I know that was one of the concerns that they had here in Canada, that people were still continuing to fly into the country, but no one was monitoring where they went. So you had issues based on that, but it sounds like Israel, as you said, particularly in those circumstances, has been much more strict. Let's talk about Yom HaShoah and not Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, yesterday and today. Tell us a little bit, because I know you've been in Israel for some time. This is not your first visit. Joshua, you've been in Israel now for 3.5 years. And Abby, you've studied in Israel over the course of the last few years. If this were a normal time, what would you be doing for Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut? And what's different about this year and what's happening this year for Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, and Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Day of Independence?
Right. So Yom HaZikaron is obviously quite a personal day for the country. Just the sheer number of fallen Israeli soldiers that are remembered, together with the victims of terror that was added on a number of years ago. So the day memorializes both fallen soldiers and victims of terror. So it's not hard to find a family that knows somebody personally who's memorialized on the day. But obviously, the day took on a different nature this year. It's normally observed by people visiting by tkasim, by ceremonies, together with visiting during the day of during the daytime visiting cemeteries. But again, like all the other restrictions, it was put in place the closing of cemeteries to make sure that there wouldn't be large gatherings, which was difficult because you can imagine a bereaved family that mourns this day together with the rest of the state is used to going and visiting the grave, perhaps of a child or a sibling, a parent. They now need to memorialize them, in a much smaller and limited capacity, and it's obviously.
Right. I just put up for everybody to see a picture of Joshua when he was in the IDF. He was in Givati as a sharpshooter. So here's a picture of Joshua while he was in the army. So as you were saying, it must be very difficult not to be able to, because I know you're aware of people who've lost and you've known people who've passed away. So that must be challenging. So what do they do without being able to go yesterday to the graves?
Right. So just like the rest of the world, they've taken on, to Zoom and to other, just like we're doing now, they've taken on other mediums in order to make sure that there's still ceremonies to memorialize. Tkasim, these types of ceremonies are really big, for holidays in general in Israel. So they use the creative spirit that they usually have to make these ceremonies special, and they just used it towards doing it in a virtual manner.
In addition, if I'm not mistaken, in the past, every grave of a fallen soldier will have a current soldier stand by their grave on Yom HaZikaron. And if I'm not mistaken, the IDF did that again this year, despite not having the family around, so that they made sure that every grave was visited, so that they were thought of and remembered on that day.
Right. And that there's also there are other grassroots initiatives to that if there was the grave that wanted to be visited by a family member and they weren't able to do that, that there were initiatives in the days prior that you could message various organizations to send a representative to film the grave in the days prior, so that there'd be some sort of connection to to the site, even if you weren't able to be there on Yom HaZikaron itself.
Well, I know in Israel that the link, that connection on Yom HaZikaron between the soldiers, men and women, from before the beginning of the state until now, and who've sacrificed their lives, that's so important, such an integral part of Israel. And that, from what you're sharing with me, was able to continue in a different way, but to continue that link, that memory of those who have given their lives.
Right.
Well, I think that's an integral part of the Israeli identity as a whole. You take Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, and what does that symbolize? Having them back to back, one day literally turning into the other day with nightfall. Like, that is the essence of the Israeli identity, is seeking those who have lost their lives, mourning those who came before us to give us the security that we have today, and then celebrating them in what they were able to give to us and what current soldiers around the whole country continue to give to us every single day. And we celebrate that with the turn of nightfall.
Right. When the security threats are still so real, and the borders, still need to be defended to this day, the appreciation, the necessity to recognize those who gave their lives prior to celebrating Israel's independence, still needs to be done, because there continues to this day, the threats, and therefore you can't celebrate without recognizing the ultimate sacrifices that were paid by those who came before us.
And so you were saying that last night, same thing for us, although you're 7 hours ahead of us. How is that transition made for Yom HaAtzmaut? Well, tell us, what would you be doing, again, if this were a regular Yom HaAtzmaut? What would you be doing now? And what are you doing now, other than being in your apartment together for Yom HaAtzmaut?
Right. So the country transitions, over the years, this is also, the diaspora has also transitioned in a similar manner by conducting these kasim mavar, these transitionary ceremonies, where they mark the transition by again, once more ending the memorial period of Yom HaZikaron, and then either in a religious community with a special tefillah, the recitation of Hallel and music to mark the beginning of even Yom HaAtzmaut, which has even a religious component to it. So that was marked. So normally that would be marked throughout the country. There are different outdoor prayer services that are held. For the past few years, I attended one outside the old city walls with thousands of other people, organized by the municipality. There's a big ceremony that always takes place with a torch lighting on Har Herzl. So like everything else, they took on a different nature this year. The torch lighting and that big ceremony, I think, was held with very few participants, but still on Har Herzl, streamed live. And we heard the tefillah, we heard the prayer services, all around the neighborhood. But the official capacity to do planned gatherings did not happen.
So what is it about Israel? And I guess you have an opportunity to think about it more, since you're not able to be out like you would be. But what does Israel mean to both of you? You have chosen to make Aliyah, Joshua 3.5 years ago, and Abby almost close to a year ago, officially. So what is it about Israel that, in spite of what is taking place, that you have made the commitment to be there and to live there? So what is that like for you, and especially now?
Well, we were talking about this recently. We were discussing, the two of us, about how different parts of the world, this is something new. You know, I think the whole world, this is a new experience for all of us. But the degree to which life has been affected of this magnitude is something that's new for most of the world. Israel, on the other hand, well, yes, this is a new experience. They've adapted because they're used to adapting to things happening in a second. For instance, the threats against the country and the need in order for everyone to come together and to support one another is something, unfortunately, that Israel has experienced. With wars that have taken place over the course of a summer, which has changed people's plans and caused large gatherings to be stopped, and stopped schools, and caused people to have to move to hotels, maybe not for a quarantine because of a virus, but because of it just wasn't safe in their area of the country. So Israelis are used to coming together. And this family bond that we've been so grateful to be a part of everyone kind of coming together and helping one another is something that we've been very fortunate to be able to join. And we've seen it in this whole period. But it's something that, yes, while this is a new period, this is something that Israelis have experienced, the need to come together and help one another. And that continues to be something that's that's experienced every day now.
I think when you live in a country like Israel, which is, I would say, still developing, like we turned 72 today, it's not 100-year-old, 200, 300, 400-year-old country. You're talking about a country that's 72 years old, that still goes through growing pains every day, every week, and every year. And I think that when young people like us, or anybody who comes and decides to move their lives to Israel, you take the good with the bad. And that's what Israel does as a community. It takes the good with the bad and loves it anyway. It loves it because of the bad. It loves it because it knows that everything we're doing will make a difference in the country.
Right. Only country where you have people that are you stop them on the street and they'd be in a second can give you a million things that they struggle with, or that they like to complain about. And yet when you look at the happiness index, Israel ranks among one of the highest. So they're, while they're easy to complain, they have no they have no issues, or they have a clear happiness with their lives. And they're, I think it's because of times like this that they recognize they're used to the hardships, and therefore it makes them appreciate the day-to-day, more than citizens of other countries might.
One of the things that I saw when you talked about community and everybody getting together, maybe you can share a little bit about the area where you live. I know that when we were with you, fortunately in February, when we were at shul with you, and all the numbers of young people, not just Israelis, but people from diaspora who've committed themselves to Israel. I thought that was something that was very special. Maybe reflect a little bit about that and the kind of chevra that you have.
So that's very true. We are very fortunate to live in a very young and also Anglo community. So we are surrounded by people around our age, plus or minus like a couple of years. And like when we go to shul, Friday night and Shabbat and holidays and everything in between, we are surrounded by hundreds of people our age doing what we're doing, just trying to have like live life in the best way that they can.
The community that's created, no, we've spoken about this numerous times, that the community, there's nothing that can be compared to the community that's created when people come alone, when many, at least in our area that we're friends with, come alone without family, or at least without, many of them without parents, with their parents being abroad. That means that the community that's created is unparalleled, because you need to jump in and fulfill that that assistance, that sense of family that normally parents might fill. So that means when friends have a simcha, or if they need help, we're coming together to be able to help them, because because we're all here for an ideological purpose, without our parents.
I know that's certainly true. Just to give a few examples of where you are, I know that Lisa Nerman and Alan Goldstein, that their son Simcha lives nearby, and his fiancee Jenny, and also Ashley Offenheim, the granddaughter of our members. Sandy and Harold Offenheim also live near you as well. So there's perhaps hundreds of people like you. So what do you do, since you can't see each other? So what do you do to, again, continue to maintain community with your friends, with your family on every day, but also again on this day?
I think that just like the rest of the world, we're doing as best as we can to stay in touch with our loved ones in our community here. So, WhatsApp, Zoom, FaceTime, we're trying to push through as best as we can, making plans for the future, although we don't know when those plans might happen. But let's have a Shabbos meal. Let's make sure when this is done, we'll all go to the park. And I think it's like keeping that hope, that reassuring, remembering that other people are going through this too, and that you do have your friends and your community waiting for you just past our 100-meter limit to continue as best as we can.
So any thoughts about the coming weekends and months ahead for you, for the country, as we now begin with another year moving forward for Medinat Yisrael, now that we've celebrated the 72nd for this coming year?
So they announced today in the news that Israel now has more people that have recovered from COVID-19 than are currently in the period of trying to get better. So Israel, at least in terms of their dealing with the crisis, I think they've certainly passed the peak, as the terminology is. So hopefully, at least in terms of the practical day-to-day, over the next few weeks, we're going to start to see Yom Ha'atzmaut today kind of marks the end between Pesach and Yom Zikaron. Yom Ha'atzmaut marks the end of these periods of potential large gatherings. So hopefully this is the last day that we'll really see a lot of restrictions in place to prevent the potential for large gatherings, which means that slowly we're going to start to see a return to schools, return to workplaces. So for the 72nd year, having gone through a crisis just like the rest of the world that is unprecedented, hopefully Israel will be able to take from the experience and build itself in terms of the future to be able to better be prepared for such a situation, just like everyone else. There's going to be pains in getting over this. Israel is at 25% unemployment now as a result of the precautions that were taken to reduce people interacting. so there will be growing pains in terms of getting back to where they were before this. But the economy is strong, and at 8.2 million people, I think Israel is in a good place to be able to recover from this and learn from this experience for future years.
Right. You had mentioned also something about the flyovers that were being done today. Right.
So, as is customary in a lot of countries with Independence Day, they do the military, the Air Force does special flyovers. So this year in particular, if you looked at the list of the cities and what times you'd be able to see it in your respective city in the country, they focused on hospitals in each city. So in order to salute the healthcare workers who are at the forefront and the front lines of this issue, it was focused that these would be the prime places in each of the cities that the flyovers would occur.
Well, I think, and you're so absolutely correct about the idea of Israel coming together, whether it's at a time of war or at a time of pandemic such as this, as the rest of the world is doing. But Israel has unique perspective in how they do coming together. But just a few thoughts to leave you with is that even though you're in Jerusalem and we're here in Toronto, that there is still a very strong bond between us. And I certainly want you to remember, and I hope that you know, that it's not just us in Toronto, but throughout the world, that we are there, even if it's not being there physically, that we are there in spirit to help support you and to be with you. And in particular, on this Yom HaAtzmaut, as you said before, it's the 72nd anniversary, 72 being 4 times Chai. And it's young people like yourselves who are helping to ensure that Israel has life and continues to have life. And that together we will make sure that that does not end, but only continues to grow. And I'm hoping that once the restrictions are started to be easing a little bit more, and we'll be able to travel between North America and Europe and Israel, that more people will continue to do that. So we show by our physical presence as well how committed we are to Israel. I thought before we finish that I'd like to, and for some maybe concluding remarks from you, that I'd like to conclude with a prayer for Medinat Yisrael as we come together to celebrate this 72nd anniversary of Israel's independence. Avinu Shabashamayim, Suri Yisrael v'goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Smecha Kulatenu, Hagen Aleha be'evrat chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukash Lomecha, Ushlach Orcha v'yamitcha l'rasheha, Sareha v'yotzeha, V'taknem be'itza tova mefanecha, Chazek et yidei miginei eretz kodshenu, V'anchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, V'yateret nitzachom teatrem, V'natat hashalom ba'aretz, Simchat olam be'yoshveha v'nomar Amen. Our God who is in heaven, rock and redeemer of the people of Israel, bless Medinat Yisrael, the state of Israel, with its promise of redemption. Shield it with your love, spread over it the shelter of your peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Help them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Deliver them, crown their efforts with triumph. Bless the land with peace and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And together we say, Amen.
Amen.
So if you'd like to maybe close with some some parting thoughts for us on this Yom Ha'atzmaut, live from Jerusalem.
Yeah, it's been a real honor to be able to share with the Adath Israel community our feelings on this Yom Ha'atzmaut, especially one that's been slightly different than the standard, but meaningful and impactful nonetheless. When you were speaking about the connection between the Jews of North America, Jews of Canada returning and visiting Israel when this is all over, I think the relationship is in both directions, and I think as much as Israel is a source of pride, a place to visit, and a place where the prayers of every Jew is directed towards every day. Israel benefits and continues to benefit from the relationship with world Jewry and with the diaspora and non-Jews as well. And it's so important that that the hakarat tov and the appreciation that's directed also be directed from Israel outwards towards Canada and North America and worldwide, because there's a real duality to the relationship, and as such, we're praying along with everyone else that the situation improves as quickly as possible, and that everything can return to normal in all areas of the world, Israel and the diaspora as well.
So thank you again both so very much, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you again online, but also we hope in the physical sense as well. So Chag Sameach and happy Yom Ha'atzmaut.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.